In this episode of the D-Pad, I'll be taking a look back at this year's E3. Who had the best showing? Who had the worst showing? What are my predictions for next gen? All of this will be coming up right here on this episode of the D-Pad.
Brad Davis present.
Alright, there you go. Alright, hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of the D-Pad. I'm your host, Brad Davis, and you're watching a show that's all about video games. This episode will take a look back at E3, this year's E3. It was a very important E3 since it set the tone for the next gen of gaming that's coming up for each of the big three gaming companies, Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo. Now, what I'm going to do is take a look at what each of these three companies shown during the past month's E3. And also just state my overall opinion about what I feel will happen as next gen moves along based on what they shown. Alright, so let's get things underway. We have a lot of things to talk about. Let's start things off by going with the company that went first, and that company is Microsoft. Alright, now Microsoft started off their E3 2013 Xbox press conference by showing off Metal Gear Solid 5. Now, even though this game is obviously coming to other platforms, the PlayStation and Xbox platforms, this gen and next gen platforms, it was a smart thing to show off the game during the Xbox press conference, since it basically gives the game more of a tie to Xbox platforms, since people still think of PlayStation when they think of Metal Gear. But anyway, the game looked really good. It kind of reminded me of Red Dead Redemption when they showed off, the parts on the horse, and how you could, go behind the horse while you're still riding it to, sneak away from enemies. That seemed pretty cool. And overall, it seemed like it will be a really good game. So that was a good way to start the conference. Microsoft said that the E3 press conference would be about games, and they started off with a really big game, one of the biggest games that are gonna come out soon. So that was a really good way to start off the conference, in my opinion. Alright, so after they showed off Metal Gear Solid 5, they then showed off the new Xbox 360. It's a slimmer version of it, and during the conference it seemed pretty slim, like they cut it down to a pretty significant size. But after the conference, I looked at some videos, unboxing videos, and some pictures during the days after the conference. And overall, the system itself isn't really that slimmer than the current Xbox 360S that is in stores now. So if you already have one, there's really no reason to get one, really. But the style of the system is similar to the style of the Xbox One. It has a matte and shiny black finish to it, and it blends both styles together in one. Now, with this remodel, I was also expecting a price drop, but Microsoft is keeping the price the same for all the Xbox models, the new Xbox Slim models that are coming in stores. Well, that are in stores right now, matter of fact. And I was surprised by this. I was definitely expecting a price drop. I mean, there's still a Xbox 360 model that's $400, and that's the 250 gigabyte Xbox 360 that comes with Kinect. And considering that the Xbox 360 is almost 10 years old, it's crazy that there's still a model of the Xbox 360 that's still $400. So I was definitely expecting a price drop, but it seems like Microsoft, feels that, since the system is still selling decently, that they can just keep the price the same. And then once the, ball like greatly drops, that's when they drop the price. But like I said, people are still apparently buying the 360, even though, it's $300, $400 for an almost 10-year-old console. So I guess Microsoft just feels, they could go on with keeping it the same price. Alright, now speaking of the Xbox 360, they also showed some of the upcoming Xbox 360 games that are coming soon. They start off with World of Tanks. They made a pretty big deal about this game. Overall, it's not really my type of game. I mean, it looked okay based on what they shown in the trailer, but I overall don't get the hype. I mean, I know that's a game that's pretty popular, at least on PC, but overall, it just doesn't seem like really that exciting to me personally. Now, a game that looked really good was the Max game. This game, is kind of like a platform action adventure game, and it looks, pretty high quality for it to be a Xbox Live Arcade title. But that's how the Xbox Live Arcade games have been recently. They've been increasing in quality, and this game looks really good. I mean, the graphics look good, the overall style and presentation looks good. It looks like a high budget cartoon that you would see on TV. So I'm interested in that game, definitely. And also they showed Dark Souls 2. A lot of people like the first one, so people apparently like the trailer to this one, even though I'm not interested in the series at all. But graphically it looked pretty good. Now after this, Microsoft focused their whole conference on Xbox One in terms of games. So this was, the bread and butter part of their press conference, and they started off by showing off Rise. Now Rise graphically looks amazing. I thought it was definitely one of the best looking games that Microsoft showed at their E3 conference. But in terms of the gameplay seemed pretty basic. A lot of button taps and button presses, a lot of quick time events, and that seemed, pretty I guess pretty basic when you consider that the game looks so good graphically. It looks amazing graphically, like really detailed graphically, but in terms of the gameplay it looks really basic. But maybe that was just how it was seen from that trailer that they showed. Well, excuse me, not that trailer, but the demo gameplay that they showed. And maybe the game will actually be more in depth. We'll find out soon, I guess. Now after that, they showed off the new Killer Instinct. I knew this game was coming. There was a lot of rumors about it coming back, and the game looks pretty fun. I watched streams of this game being played by the people in the fighting game community, and it looks like a really fun game to play, pick up and play. The graphics are good. The style of the user interface reminds me a lot of Street Fighter, which I found to be kind of strange in a way, but overall it really doesn't matter much. The game looks fun, even though it's being made by a small team. A lot of people say, why should people get excited for this game since it's made by a small team? But overall the game looks really fun based on what I've seen from the streams in the fighting game community of them fighting in Killer Instinct. Alright, now after that they showed Sunset Overdrive. This game was really interesting to me, looked really interesting to me since the overall pop art style of the game looks a lot, reminds me a lot of Jet Grind Radio, and the overall music that they played in the background too reminded me of Jet Grind Radio. It was like kind of like offbeat Japanese rock, if I remember correctly, and it just seems like a really unique game, and it looked good. So I'm looking forward to seeing some gameplay footage of Sunset Overdrive. After Sunset Overdrive, they showed off Forza Motorsport 5, and as a big Forza fan, I was really interested in seeing what they would show off at the conference. And it was basically what they usually showed off every other year or so when they when it's the conference before a Forza Motorsport release. They put the car up on stage like they usually do, and then they just talked about the game. And from what I hear, this game was one of the best games in terms of graphics at the E3 conference, and the game looks amazing from what I've seen in videos. And I'm really looking forward to this game since I'm a big Forza fan, and the graphics, they're definitely the next gen jump in terms of graphics. So I'm really looking forward to getting the game in my hands and playing it. Alright, and then after Forza 4, they showed off Quantum Break. The game looks good. I mean, I don't know what the game is exactly about since it didn't show off that much, but if the game looks as good as the trailer, then the game will be a pretty interesting game. I mean, the overall dialogue between the characters and everything reminds me a lot of high budget movies, and it seems like it'll be a good way to a good game to start off the early life of a next gen console, and showing how that console is a improvement over what people are playing now. That I could see Quantum Break being a highlight for the Xbox One console when it releases. Okay, they also showed off a game called Project Spark. The game looks to be the Xbox version of Little Big Planet. You get to create a lot of things, especially using Xbox Smart Glass. You get to make things on a tablet and then send them off into the game. And the demo, the game itself looked good, but the demo kind of was cheesy. The dialogue between the two guys that worked on the game was really forced, and you could tell it was really set up in terms of just the conference itself. That they practiced their lines, but it just didn't go off well. It didn't sound natural at all. But even though that was the case, I'm still interested in the game since it seemed really cool and it seemed really in depth. So I'm definitely gonna try out the game whenever it releases on the Xbox One console. Alright, well, speaking of Xbox features too, they also showed off the Xbox One multitasking feature where you could set up a match while you're playing another game. And they did this by showing off a person playing Rise and then going into Killer Instinct, and it seemed like a really good feature. Overall, it seemed like if you really weren't paying attention, that they were just going from one game to the next game, like they usually do in press conferences. But it seemed like a cool feature, but it would have been better if Microsoft would have talked about it more a little bit, since I'm pretty sure a lot of people didn't realize what they did or what they showed off during the conference itself. But anyway, after that, they announced the Twitch partnership, and basically you'll be able to stream games over Twitch TV on the Xbox, and it was a pretty big announcement. A lot of people use and or watch game streams on Twitch TV, so I felt that it was a pretty cool feature to put on the Xbox One, and I know that a decent amount of people will be using the feature to stream off their games. After they announced this, they showed off Crimson Dragon, which takes me back to the Sega Saturn Panzer Dragoon, and the game looked good, but during the showing of the game itself, the game didn't have any sound, and the people that were watching the conference were in the same room were making sounds, in-game sounds, or trying to replicate in-game sounds, as the game was playing on the big screens, and it was pretty funny. But it seemed like this E3 overall was the E3 for technical difficulty, since there's a lot of sound problems during this year's E3 during the conferences. But Crimson Dragon, it looks like a pretty fun game. The game looked good graphically, and I'm looking forward to trying it out whenever it comes out. Now, after they showed Crimson Dragon, they showed off Dead Rising 3. They showed off the return of the Dead Rising series. This series, was the first game came out during the early life of the Xbox 360. So it was pretty fitting for them to bring it back to use for to have as a game for the early life of the Xbox One console, and it will be a launch title for the Xbox One. People that are fans of the series seem to be excited for the game, and therefore I think that the game will do well for people who enjoyed the previous Dead Rising games. They also after this, they showed off The Witcher 3, and people who like Witcher 2 were really pumped up for Witcher 3, what they showed off at the E3 press conference, Microsoft's press conference. And it seems like the game will do well for fans who like the second game. Then from The Witcher 3 to transition into Battlefield 4, and again there was problems starting up the game. You know, it seemed, like I said before, technical difficulty seemed to be the overall theme of this year's E3. Last year's overall theme was dubstep, and this year's overall theme was technical difficulties. But once the game, once they started playing the game, looked good, really good graphically. I mean, it didn't seem that different from what we already saw previously during other previous press conferences in which they showed Battlefield 4 off. But overall, the game, looked really good graphically. I can see a lot of people buying the game when the Xbox One launches. Now, there was a big thing going on about Xbox One in terms of indie games, the system not having self-publishing. But they showed off an indie game called Below, and this game actually looked pretty interesting to me. It wasn't, that, I guess you could say, that amazing looking, but the overall style of the game seemed pretty neat and pretty nice looking. And the game just overall seems like really interesting. I wish they would have showed off, more about the game, or at least talked about it more instead of just showing a trailer. But I'll definitely keep an eye out on, at least keep an eye out for the game whenever it releases, and see what people say about the game, and then see if I will be able to try it out based on what they say in terms of it, either being good or bad. Now, a new, I guess you could say, team that are making exclusive games for the Xbox One is Black Tusk. And Black Tusk showed off their game that they're making. They didn't show off, that much, and they didn't show off, announce the title for the game. But the game looked good. Like, if what they showed during that trailer is, how the game is gonna look, then it looks really good. It kind of reminded me, kind of like Tom Clancy games, of, kind of how they were, kind of going down that glass building, and that's what it reminded me of. It reminded me of some Tom Clancy games. But overall, it seems like they're making a really good game that wasn't, completely ready to show off at this year's E3 press conference. So I'm looking forward to seeing, what they're making, in the upcoming months. Maybe in another conference, or maybe there'll be like an online trailer that comes out of the game, or maybe they'll just wait to show off the game in full during next year's E3. Don't know, but overall I'm looking forward to seeing what they're making, since so far it looks pretty good. Now, in terms of games, they ended off the Xbox One press conference by announcing the new Halo that's going to come out for the Xbox One. New Halo is going to come out during the fall of 2014, and it seems like the trailer itself, at first I didn't even realize it was Halo. It didn't look like Halo. I thought it was, a completely different game. But then when they showed off, the helmet, that's when I knew, okay, now this is Halo. And they didn't show off, that much about, the game, Halo 5. They didn't talk about what the game will be about. But overall, I'm interested in the game. I thought Halo 4 was a pretty decent game. It was my favorite Halo in terms of Xbox 360 Halos, because I played it so much. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with Halo 5, the first next-gen Halo. Now, after they show off Halo, they then, after they show off Halo, they announced the price of the Xbox One. And this is what kind of surprised me. I was definitely expecting a $400 price point, but they announced that the Xbox One will be $500. Now, as I said before, the Xbox 360 is still being sold at stores for $300 and $400. So when you put that into consideration, the Xbox One being $500 doesn't seem all that much, since it's just, that $100 difference between $400 and $500. That's like the next gen price difference that you usually see when new consoles release, in comparison to, the price of the new console in comparison to the console's successor. But overall, it seems like that $100 difference is due to, the Xbox One obviously being a next gen system. It's just that, $500 is still a decent amount of money, and I could see a lot of people, holding off until the Xbox One gets more games, or even you know, gets a price drop, which I predict will happen sometime, you know, in 2014. I think that Microsoft is just trying to really bank in on those really hyped up early adopter gamers that will buy the console as soon as it comes out. So we'll see what happens in terms of that, how the system will do in terms of sales. But overall, it seems that, you know, Microsoft doesn't want to drop the price of the 360, and therefore they had to, you know, make the Xbox One 500 to, you know, widen the gap in between this gen consoles and the next gen console. So overall, the Microsoft E3 press conference for this year was pretty decent. They show off a lot of games. You know, they definitely stuck to the whole games thing. They said it would be all about games, and they definitely weren't lying. You know, it was definitely about games. Now, when it comes to this point in time, in terms of when the E3 conference happened, the Xbox One still had DRM, and it was really, I guess, interesting to see Microsoft not really talk about that at all, or talk about the features that the Xbox One had that would, you know, make people still interested in the console even though it had DRM. I mean, there was the family digital sharing plan in which, you know, people could digitally share games with up to 10 people on their friends list, and it seemed pretty cool, and people, you know, were interested in the feature after the E3 conference once more news came out about the feature, but it didn't really show off the feature that in depth during the E3 conference. You know, and that was just really weird. And overall, it just seemed like they weren't prepared in terms of, you know, letting people know all the features about the Xbox One, you know, since they really glanced over them, I feel, during E3, and, you know, they didn't really talk about them in depth and really sell them to make people interested in the system, even though it had, at the time, it had DRM. And, you know, I think that this was part of the reason why Microsoft had to change the Xbox One console in terms of DRM, so a lot of people still weren't sold on the console due to them not talking about all the features of the Xbox One in depth to make them, you know, attractive to people that would buy the system early. So overall, the Microsoft E3 conference was good. They definitely stuck to their word about it being about games. You know, it definitely was about games, and it showed off, you know, a lot of interesting games, a lot of good looking games. But on the flip side, they didn't really talk about the features of the Xbox One that much to, you know, to offset the news, the bad news about the Xbox One at the time having DRM. And I feel that them, you know, I'm talking about DRM, was pretty, I guess you could say pretty bad in terms of making the Xbox One, well, people interested in the Xbox One, you know, want to get the system, you know, since they just glanced over, you know, they you know, didn't respond to the negativity at all, and it just seemed kind of I guess you could say kind of cocky in a way. And also they didn't really when they were going over the things that they showed off at the conference, you know, they were showing off the games, there wasn't really a you know, kind of a personal touch to when they were talking. You know, it didn't seem, it seemed more like a you know, advertisement in terms of when they had the conference. You know, when they showed off each game, it seemed like they were just more so, you know, having advertisements using really catchy marketing terms and phrases instead of, you know, being personal to the people that are watching the show. And this, you know, definitely showed in some of the game demos that they were having. You know, the dialogue in between people, you know, it seemed really forced and really cheesy, because you could tell that they were, you know, lines that were, you know, written in advance that they had to practice and say at the conference. So it would have been better if they would have made things more natural and just more personal in terms of the people that were watching the conference. So that was one negative thing I felt about the conference itself, even though they showed a lot of games. But overall, you know, this was definitely one of the Microsoft's best conferences, in my opinion, during E3 in a pretty long time, you know, since it was about games. And therefore, I'm going to give their E3 press conference for 2013 a B-. Now Microsoft, you know, they started off by showing a major game, but Sony started off their PlayStation E3 conference by talking about the PS Vita. And the PS Vita definitely needs attention, since as you may already know, the PS Vita isn't doing well at all in terms of sales, and the system needs more games. And they really didn't talk about games for the PS Vita that much. They mainly talked about how the PS Vita would interact with the PS4 in the future with second screen gameplay, and how the PS Vita will now be a companion to the PS4. During the previous, during this year, beginning of this year as well as 2012, they're talking about how the PS Vita would be a companion to your PS3, but now they're pushing the PS Vita to be a companion to the PS4, which I think is a pretty smart move. And from when I heard, all the games for the PS4 outside of the games that use motion control will be required to have some type of functionality with the PS Vita, and I think that this is a pretty smart thing for Sony to do in terms of trying to make the PS Vita do better than it's doing right now. I can see many people getting PS Vita just for that interaction in between the PS4 and PS Vita, not necessarily just because of the PS Vita games. But overall, we'll see how the system does, since it definitely needs to do a lot better than how it's doing now, since it is pretty sad in terms of how the system is doing in comparison to the 3DS. It's 3DS is really kicking the PS Vita's butt. Alright, now after talking about the PS Vita, they talked about the PS3 lineup, and PS3 is getting a lot of good looking games this year. I mean, The Last of Us was recently released, and that got really good reviews. And coming soon is Gran Turismo 6, and I feel, even though it should be a really solid racing game, the series itself was always known for being top of the line quality. So for it to come out on the PS3, an old console, almost 10-year-old console, instead of the PS4, it's kind of strange to me. I'm still, it feels, like the series, the Gran Turismo series itself is just, decreasing in quality in terms of it being top of the line. Since Gran Turismo 5 was pretty disappointing, after all the years and years of waiting due to all the delays, and now to see Gran Turismo 6 come out for the PS3 instead of the new consoles in the game, with the game more likely coming out at the same time that the PS4 will be in stores, it just seems really strange. And it seems like the series is kind of moving away from its top of the line quality that it had each and every time it released. Since during the PS2 days, you knew when you had Gran Turismo that the game was the best sim racing you could get on a console. And now it's starting to feel as if the series is kind of falling behind, especially in comparison to Forza Motorsport, which will obviously have a game for next gen ready for the Xbox One launch. So I feel that Gran Turismo 6 for the PS3, while I understand that they want to sell the game to as many people that they can, and due to the PS3 user base obviously gonna being bigger than what the PS4 user base will be during its release, I still feel that there should at least be a version for the PS4 during the same time or something, since it just doesn't seem right to have the top of the line series that's known for high graphics to be released on a almost 10-year-old console. But anyway, after this, they showed off the PS4 console itself. Many people were kind of annoyed, I guess you could say, due to Sony not showing off the PS4 console back in February during the first PS4 conference. But they showed it off here. They said that they would, and overall, I feel like the system doesn't look all that great. It looks kind of short and stubby, but the look of the console doesn't really matter much. It's what the console has in terms of games and features, so that will definitely be more important to people. But overall, I don't really like the look of the PS4 console that much. Now, after it showed off what the PS4 console will look like, they talked about new services, media services coming to the PlayStation console. These services were for music and video, and there was a lot of people saying the PlayStation console is all about games and stuff. But I told people that Microsoft and Sony both want to go for the living room. They both want their boxes or their consoles to be the center of the living room. So Sony is definitely going to go for the same media, type of features that Microsoft is going for, especially since Sony has their own branches of their own companies that make media. You have Sony Music and you have Sony Video that make TV shows and movies. So they definitely want their content to be delivered to their own box that they make for consumers. So none of what they showed during the conference in terms of the media features didn't surprise me. What I was expecting was for a lot of gamers to go up in arms about them showing off media features during E3, but many just kind of ignored it, brushed it off, which I was surprised by, especially since all those years of Xbox showing off media features during E3 and people being annoyed by that. But it seems like people weren't that annoyed by Sony doing it, and I guess it's because Sony doesn't really have that much of a history of doing it during E3. So it was kind of interesting to see that response from gamers during that point of the Sony E3 press conference. Now, after talking about this, they showed off a game called The Older 1886, and this game to me was the best looking exclusive game that they showed off during the whole PlayStation 4 E3 press conference. The game looked really interesting, and a lot of people felt the same. A lot of people felt that the game was also the best looking game that they showed off during the conference. So they didn't really go into detail about the game itself. They didn't show off much of the game, but it just seems interesting based on what they showed, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of the game itself soon. Now, after this, they showed off the early PS4 exclusive titles: Killzone, Infamous Second Son, Drive Club, and Knack. And all these games, out of the bunch, I think Infamous looks the best, but Infamous isn't a launch title, unfortunately. So in between Drive Club, Knack, and Killzone, overall the games don't seem that interesting to me. Those three games will be released during the PS4 launch. I guess if I had to choose, I would choose Drive Club since I'm a big racing game fan. But even from what I'm hearing from people who were at E3, they said Drive Club wasn't that impressive. Now it could be just because the game is still, what they had at E3 was just an early build. But it just looks kind of generic to me. And so does Killzone. Killzone just seems like another, shooter to me. And Knack seems interesting due to its kind of Katamari Damacy gameplay, where you could, make the player, get objects stuck to them kind of like a magnet. The game just overall doesn't seem like a next-gen game. It seems like more of a PS3 title in terms of its graphics. But that's kind of when a console releases during this launch, you will still have a few games here and there that look like last-gen games, but just a little tiny bit more detailed. And I guess you could say a Knack fits into that category. All right, now after this, they showed off some of the upcoming indie games coming out to the PS4. And some of these games include Transistor and Galaxy. And I felt that it was pretty cool how Sony gave indie game developers their own way to show off their games in terms of like a large scale way of showing off their games, like treating these indie developers the same way that they treat big AAA game developers. And I felt that it was pretty cool how they let them show off their games during their big conference, since many people were able to see what they had in store. And it definitely seems like PS4 will be a good system to get if you're really interested in having a bunch of indie games, especially since the console will allow for self-publishing, as been stated previously in many articles from many video game sites. So seeing Sony partner up with indie game developers in this way, having them be on their stage during their big E3 press conference that's being viewed by millions upon millions of people all over the globe, is a pretty cool thing and a nice thing for Sony to do. Now after this, they showed off the Kingdom Hearts, and they announced that the new Kingdom Hearts will be for the PS4, as well as Final Fantasy 15 will be for the PS4. And I felt that this was another smart thing, since due to me being somebody who's not really into Japanese RPG games, I personally thought that the Kingdom Hearts game will be an exclusive to the PS4 since Sony got the permission to get the game to be shown off during their press conference only. But after reading up some information after the press conference, after Sony's press conference, I found out that Kingdom Hearts, the new Kingdom Hearts game, will be multi-platform and it'll be on both Xbox systems as well as PlayStation systems. But a lot of people may not know about that, especially since Kingdom Hearts is known for being a PlayStation franchise since the game was really popular on the PS2. So it was smart for Sony to be able to have the exclusive, permission to show off Kingdom Hearts at their press conference. Now, after they showed off the new Japanese RPG games, they showed off the multi-platform games that will be coming to the PS4. Games that we pretty much already seen. They had a demo of Assassin's Creed 4, and it looks decent. People are starting to get tired of the series now that it's been released every year for 6 years now. I think it's been. Some people are getting tired of the series, which is understandable. But I mean, it looks good. It looks like a good game to get for a next-gen console at launch. They also show off Watch Dogs. I'm still really hyped for this game. It was basically the reason why I'm going to get a next-gen console at launch. It's because of this game, because this game looks so amazing. Last year's E3, I was excited for the game. The first trailer they showed for the game, I was excited for the game at E3 2012, and I'm just excited for it now in 2013, especially since the game is getting closer to being released. So I'm definitely pumped up for Watch Dogs. And they also had a demo of NBA 2K14. It looks good. From what I can tell, it doesn't seem like it will be a true next-gen jump. Seems like it will be the current-gen version with a few added features there. But then again, this is pretty expected for some games to be this way during the early part of a new console's life. For them to look similar to what the predecessors, the predecessor of the console looks in terms of the graphics of the games that console is getting. So overall, it doesn't seem like a big jump up, but the NBA 2K series has been good throughout this last half of this current gen. So I'm expecting NBA 2K14 to be good as well. All right, now after this came the really big hard-hitting news, the news that made people go crazy all over Twitter. It made me go crazy because it was just so amazing the way they announced this. But the announcement came of the PS4 not having DRM, and again, this was when the Xbox One's old policies for restrictions on disc games was still in effect. So this was really big news. I mean, when they announced this, everybody got up on their feet. My Twitter feed went crazy of people just saying, wow, this is, amazing. And just the fashion they did it, you could tell that they were going right in on Microsoft. And it reminded me a lot of how E3 used to be, during the Nintendo versus Sega days, how each company would, battle it out, you could tell, pretty blatantly that the company was responding right directly to what the other company they're competing, their competitor was doing. So to see, this in this fashion in 2013 was, it took me back to the 90s in terms of, the video game advertisements and stuff like that, since that's what it felt like. It felt like, a video game advertisement from the 90s. And when you add that in with the video that they released on YouTube after their E3 press conference of how the PS4 would share used games, that's really funny, and it went viral, like I would say at least like an hour or so at most after the conference. It just reminded me a lot of the 90s in terms of video game advertisements, and it just brought me back to that whole battle between the competitors. While some of it might be childish, it still brought me back to that time. So it was really a fun a fun period to be a person watching E3, the E3 Sony press conference, since that was a really big major announcement and will be remembered in E3 history years down the road from now. But the thing about this though is that at the same time they also announced that to play online you'll be required to pay for a PS Plus fee. And I feel like this was smart, you know, to put in this negative news in between the huge positive news of the PS4 not having DRM. So for for them to put the negative news in made the negative news, you know, not be remembered by many people. And you know, PS3 was known this gen for having free online gaming, and many people clinged on to the PS3 due to that reason. But now that the PS4 will require a fee to play online, it's going to be interesting to see how those same people react to the PS4 when it gets released, and them finding out that they have to pay for online. It should be interesting to see what happens, especially now that, you know, the PS4 doesn't have that advantage. Well, excuse me, the PlayStation console doesn't have that advantage of free online gaming anymore. So it makes things between the PlayStation and Xbox consoles more even now. Now after this, they also showed off Destiny, the game by Bungie. They showed off different classes that you can have inside the game, the different player classes, and the game looks good. It's interesting to see Bungie cling on to the PlayStation console, you know, since Bungie is obviously known for Halo and being, you know, part of Microsoft, but now they seem to be tying, well, at least clinging on to Sony, since I guess the PS4 version of Destiny will have some exclusive features on, you know, we'll have some exclusive features. So to see, you know, Bungie, you know, change from Microsoft to Sony is pretty interesting to me. But overall, Destiny looks like a really good game, and definitely looks like one of the most, one of the better, one of the more exciting games that are coming out to next-gen consoles in 2014. All right, and now on to another big part of the conference, which was the final part where they announced the PS4's price. The PS4 will launch at $400, which is $100 cheaper than an Xbox One. And after the DRM, you know, news, you know, about the PS4 not having DRM, you know, the price added on to that news was just like a TKO in response to Microsoft. Since when you combine those two things together, you know, a lot of people were just on their feet in terms of, you know, them being more attracted to the PS4 instead of the Xbox One. And, you know, that news also made a lot of people, you know, shout. Not as much as the news about the DRM, you know, no DRM being on the PS4, but, you know, when you combine the price, the news about the price with the DRM, you know, a lot of people were hyped. And it was just an amazing time to be a gamer watching E3 and seeing how people reacted to the news on Twitter, since, you know, people were just going crazy. And it was just really fun, and it was really you could feel the hype from the computer screen. You know, the people that were hyped watching the conference, you know, in person, you could feel their hype coming from the computer screen. So the console, even, you know, after the recent changes with the Xbox One, you know, the DRM being removed from the disc-based games, you know, the PS4 is still going to be $100 cheaper. When you add that in with the fact that the PS4 has better specs than the Xbox One, you know, a lot of people are still attracted to the PS4 at this time and are going to get it instead of the Xbox One. But overall, when you consider the fact that, you know, the Sony said these big things about DRM and the price, you know, it really made for a memorable E3 conference, you know. And when you think about it, it's not like Sony really did anything that major. The games that it showed off during their E3 press conference really weren't that big or major or eye-catching, in my opinion. I personally feel that the Xbox press conference had better looking games. But when you add in, you know, the announcement of the DRM, the system not having DRM, as well as the system, you know, being $100 cheaper, you know, that and just the reactions to those two things, you know, it just made their conference, you know, be more memorable. And I think that Sony going after Microsoft also added a bit onto that as well. But you know, there's a lot of news, you know, going around, you know, that Sony's console will have DRM2 due to the big name publishers like EA and Activision wanting it, and I believed it too. You know, I know that I believe Giant Bomb said something, you know, like that, like EA and Activision are pushing these new consoles to have DRM. So when Sony announced that they want to have DRM, I was, you know, my jaw just dropped, since I was, you know, really surprised, you know, that they were going to keep things the same as they were on the PS3. And this is why, you know, competition is good, since, you know, due to Sony, you know, keeping things the same in terms of DRM as they are now, Microsoft, you know, had to change up their, you know, their restrictions on the console, since, you know, a lot of people wouldn't have benefited from the digital features that they originally had to imbalance of the restrictions on disc games. So, you know, a lot of people were mad at Microsoft, and, you know, Microsoft got bad press and they had to change. And Sony's console not having DRM was the start of that whole snowball effect going into play in terms of, you know, DRM news catching on and even going to TV channels such as CNN, and you know, them having stories about it. So this was definitely a really big conference for Sony. Like I said, even though the games that they shown weren't, in terms of exclusive games for PS4, weren't that big or huge in my opinion, or eye-catching, I still definitely feel that they had, you know, a more memorable E3 conference in comparison to Microsoft, and therefore I'm going to give Sony's PS4 conference a B+. There was weeks ago, before E3 even happened, you know, news came out that Nintendo would have their own conference being streamed in a Nintendo Direct format, the format of them having a Ustream broadcast of them talking about the announcements on the consoles, the Nintendo consoles. And, you know, I from that point when they announced that, I knew then and there that Nintendo wasn't confident that what they showed would be that exciting or eye-catching in comparison to what Sony and Microsoft will be showing with their next-gen consoles and next-gen content for those consoles. It seemed like, you know, Nintendo wasn't, you know, confident at all. And after now that, you know, looking back on it, I definitely think that Nintendo definitely felt that way, since a lot of the things that they shown, you know, for this year's E3 wasn't that, you know, big or major. For one thing, the whole Nintendo stream was terrible. There was a lot of technical issues, you know, no sound, the stream, you know, freezing or, you know, just stuttering. It was just terrible, and it seemed like they didn't, you know, really gave a you know, test to see, you know, how the stream would do with so many people viewing it during the time that it was being streamed. It seemed like they didn't test it out, so it had so many problems, and it was hard to see anything. You know, one of my friends suggested to switch to the Japanese Nintendo Direct stream, and I did that, and it was working, you know, for the first, you know, 5 minutes or so. But after that stream had the same problems that the North American stream had, and it was just a mess overall. And I just had to, you know, click out of it and just follow up on what they shown after, you know, like about an hour after the stream was over. You know, I went to sites like Polygon and Giant Bomb and stuff like that to find out what Nintendo actually announced, because I couldn't see it at all or hear it due to the issues that the stream had. But they announced the new Mario game for Wii U, as well as the new Mario Kart game, and those two games, you know, the Mario Kart 8 looks decent. You know, it looks like a decent improvement, especially since the cars, you could go underneath the tracks and stuff now, and the graphics have improved, you know, even though they look basically like Mario Kart Wii in HD. But what really got me was the announcement of the new Mario game for the Wii U. And the Mario game coming out to the Wii U soon is Super Mario 3D World. And this game is basically a bigger version of Super Mario 3D Land, you know, with a few new added features here and there. And I feel like this was really disappointing. I mean, you know, when I think of a 3D Mario game, I'm expecting something along the lines of Mario Galaxy, something that's, you know, really big and a kind of open world, if you will. So to see that all they're doing is just basically making a sequel to what's on the 3DS, and, you know, just making, you know, a bigger version of that, it's disappointing. You know, I expect more. And I would even go as far to say that Mario Galaxy, if the first Mario Galaxy released now, the game will feel more modern than this Super Mario 3D World is coming out soon for the Wii U. And it's just overall it's lazy in my opinion. And, you know, back during the late 80s, early 90s, you had the Super Mario Land games on the original Game Boy, and you had Super Mario Worlds on the Super Nintendo, and that worked during that time. But now in 2013, you know, people just expect more, and, you know, Nintendo is like, we hear you guys, you know, we hear you guys complaining, we heard your guys' complaints, therefore we give you a new Mario game. But it's not on the same level as Galaxy. It's basically what you're already used to on a 3DS, but bigger. And it's just really disappointing. I mean, I'm amazed that, you know, Nintendo, period. I'm just amazed at them overall. Like, they just don't get it. Like, that's not to say that the Wii U doesn't have, you know, decent looking games coming out during the fall. They do, but these games I don't think are gonna be that compelling to people who don't already have a Wii U. And I don't think, you know, that they're gonna cause people to buy the system. I mean, especially when you look at the fact that Mario Kart isn't going to come out this fall. It's going to come out, you know, in 2014, as well as many other good-looking Wii U games. And, you know, this new Mario game, you know, that you know, I was expecting to be really great looking and be a good way for the Wii U to compete against the PS4 and Xbox One that's coming out in the fall at the same time. You know, due to that, I thought, you know, the Mario game would be really great looking and, you know, 3D, pretty much like a sequel to Galaxy, you know, possibly like in a different world or something. But due to it just being something, you know, that people are used to already, you know, that have a 3DS, you know, it's just really disappointing overall. Super Smash Bros. Brawl, you know, they showed that off. They showed off, you know, new characters, and that looked good too. I mean, that game, I think, you know, that game will make people get a Wii U, since that game is really fun and has a strong fan base. But the Wii U is in trouble. It's in a huge amount of trouble. The sales aren't good. The third-party support, the big, you know, AAA third-party support is, you know, basically dead. If it wasn't for Ubisoft, it would be dead. I mean, EA isn't supporting the system. I mean, you know, the system is doing bad when EA doesn't even want to put Madden on it, you know, and with that Madden game, you know, not being like a typical, you know, update to Madden each year, you know, they don't even want to put a basic roster update to Madden on the Wii U, since they feel like it won't even sell, which is, you know, just mind-blowing. The system is, you know, in a really bad spot, especially, you know, since it can't hold its own in comparison to 360 and PS3. So you can just imagine, you know, how it's going to be when it has to compete with those systems as well as the PS4 and Xbox One. It's just going to be a bad time for the Wii U, I feel. And I felt that Nintendo really needed to give like a really unique looking 3D Mario game. But to see them, you know, just make something that's basically what's on the 3DS but bigger is just really disappointing. And it gives, you know, many people, you know, a reason not to buy the Wii U. You know, if you have a 3DS, there's really no reason to get a Wii U, since similar games are coming out for the 3DS, similar counterparts are coming out for the 3DS. So it's like, you know, you could get your Nintendo fix on the 3DS. And then, you know, when you mix that in with the new next gen consoles, PS4 and Xbox One, it's like, you know, you don't even have to buy a Wii U, since you could just have the 3DS, and then one or both of those consoles to, you know, last you for the whole period of next gen. So yeah, overall, I don't know what Nintendo is doing. It seems like a lot of people don't know what they're doing either, and their E3 showing was just disappointing overall. When you add in the games, and then the games, you know, not coming out until 2014, as well as the Mario 3D game just being Mario 3D Land but bigger, and as well as just the Nintendo Direct itself having so many technical issues. It was just you know, a mess for Nintendo at this year's E3. And due to it, I'm gonna give Nintendo I'm gonna have to give them a D+ for this year's E3. So overall, that's my opinion on the three big companies at this year's E3. My look back at them. Hopefully you guys enjoy watching this show. Next gen is gonna be really interesting. No matter what console you're getting, you're gonna get, you know, good games. You know, especially if you're getting a PS4 and Xbox One, since those two consoles will have really great third-party support right out of the gate. So it'll definitely have a decent amount of games to play. And no matter what system you're getting, you know, due to, you know, the features for one console or the other console, you know, just be, you know, excited for the consoles. You know, the whole fanboy wars, console wars thing is just so old and immature, and it's just amazing to me to see people older than me, you know, participate in it, and that's like a bunch of middle school kids in the playground. But overall, just be excited for these new consoles. You know, we waited a long time. You know, this gen went on for a decent amount of time, 8 years, and many people were ready for next gen. So to waste, you know, that anticipation on, you know, just silly debates over stuff that will probably change throughout the course of next generation, it's just wasting your time, basically. So I'm really excited for the new consoles. I'm gonna have both of the PS4 and Xbox One eventually, but I'm gonna get the Xbox One first due to having more appealing games. You know, in my opinion, you know, Forza 5, Titanfall, Sunset Overdrive. You know, those games look more appealing to me than the games come out to the PS4 during the first year. But once, you know, the PS4 gets more games, I'm gonna get the PS4 probably you know, during the fall of 2014 or so. But like I said, this is the end of this episode of the D-Pad. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you guys next episode. Until then, Brad Davis saying goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.